I know.
Part of another discussion,
This is going to be fun.
right? So, I mean, we talked about AI tools and how they're used in certain businesses, especially
Yes.
yours and mine. And we come down on not just in the quality, we come down on very different parts of the argument, I think, on AI and its use in society. And so today's topic, coming out of that and some comments that we got later, was can you outrun AI to save your job? And I think yes, but
I
it's
think yes.
not going to be easy,
No, not
and
going to
it's
be
going
easy.
to make everyone like work harder and try to be more creative to do stuff. And so I'm not sure that overall, in certainly not in the short term, it's not necessarily a good thing. But before I turn it over, so you can tell me your position on it, because I deliberately wouldn't listen to your position today, just so that you can say it here, is this just like I'm not going to spend any time on housekeeping. I just want to say that what we're
Yes.
talking about is there are essentially three flavors of AI, the way people think about it, right?
Yeah.
There's general AI, which is that there's going to be one super brain that could do anything that doesn't exist, and we may theoretically never get to it. There's sort of like super AI. You don't want to think about the implications of what a super AI can do. And then there's what we're going to talk about, which is normally called narrow AI, or sometimes called specific AI. And
Yes.
that's where AI is used. I guarantee everyone who's watching this, AI is used in your life every day, and you're unaware of virtually 100% of it. But
Oh, I'm sure of
because
that.
these AI bots and programs and whatever, they're doing very specific things that used to not be possible, or were only possible at large scale and large expense, or were done by a person and don't need to be done by a person anymore. So anytime any machine you're interacting with or any business you're interacting with in an automated sense seems to be getting smarter, there's an AI behind that somewhere. But a specific AI. It might only exist for that one company. It's even possible. If the company's
Right.
big enough. Right?
I was going to
So
even add to that any search engine you might be doing.
yeah,
So every time you make a search, there's a lot of AI involved now in search.
right. And recommendations based on your search,
Yes. Yep.
right? AI is all around us and we don't notice because it's not the Skynet Terminator kind of general AI. A, it's all these little tiny AI
Right.
implementations.
Like this Amazon bot that will remain nameless because I've got one sitting next to me.
There you go. Yes, where you don't
Yes.
want to call out the name Alexa because she might say something. Yeah.
Okay.
And I use the other one. Right.
Yes.
I walk into this studio every day, and as I get down to the bottom of the stairs, I say to my assistant, turn on the studio. And all the lights and the cameras come up automatically because they're all
Yeah.
connected to Wi-Fi plugs, right? I mean, that's AI, and it's specific, but it's very useful. I'm not
It's
against it.
extremely
But
useful. Absolutely.
avoiding losing your job over it can be and will become tougher and tougher.
I
But
got
you
some
think
thoughts on
overall
that.
it's a good thing.
Yep, and I got some thoughts on that.
Go.
All right. So I was thinking about this morning when I saw what you had chosen for today's topic. And I said, I love this because, looking at some of the ways that we use AI in advertising, in writing, in search, research, it's probably going to save me 20x in time, maybe even more this year, which is kind of unexpected. At first, I figured, it might save us, 5 hours a week. It might actually be the equivalent of hiring another human being to work with me.
Right.
It's actually that much for what I do. So we tend to use AI more for like, well, I mentioned some of the things, the writing, the research, and that. I think where you and I had the biggest disagreement was in the writing side of it, because the writing side of it isn't that great. And that's the side that you're working on the most right
Right.
now.
I mean, I have a special challenge around the writing
Yeah,
side. But when it comes to my own marketing and stuff, in that even for my own sort of outbound email campaigns and stuff, I can't use an AI tool to do that. Just like I can't really use a template very much to compose those emails because the quality and effectiveness of the writing is part and parcel of what I'm selling in the first place.
right.
So you would not, if you hired like an up and coming chef, you would not expect her to show up with a bag from McDonald's. It's not that
No.
there's anything wrong with McDonald's. It's that you could have hired literally anybody, bring you food from McDonald's. I mean, you can do it on an app, and some strangers can,
DoorDash. Yeah,
right?
right.
Right, or Uber Eats or whatever. But if you hired a chef, you would be disappointed if he or she showed up with something made, in an
Extremely.
industrial facility like a McDonald's.
Hmm.
And so I have
Extremely.
a particular challenge in that. So I'm not trying to apply that to everybody, but certainly in the copywriting field, it's one of the fields where AI is making fast gains
Very fast.
and is out it's making redundant, making obsolete a lot of junior people and less skilled people, and more every day, because I mean, anything you can teach a high schooler to do, follow this formula, do these steps, write this, write that, write this, insert a line about what school they went to, and like, go Bobcats, right? Anything you could teach a high schooler to do, you can teach an AI to do, and then not need to hire the high schooler ever for that job.
Super easily. Very true.
Right.
So where I see the space in between this is, at least now, I see us becoming more specialized in the things that need more attention than what AI can give, that's very, very specialized. And very general stuff I can easily turn over to a writing AI, an ad AI, and even even Facebook now has incorporated in kind of their own AI in the advertising side of things. So there's more of an opportunity, I think, for us to specialize and really do what we love and narrow down our focus, and
Right.
let AI do some of the more basic work that we don't want to do.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah,
Something that came up in a prior video was we talked about how all of us, even at individual level, and certainly at companies, organizations, and governments, and even countries, all of us outsource most of our lives, right? We
right.
either outsource to get work done, we
Mhm.
outsource a lot of our thinking because we can't think about everything, we can't be
Right.
experts on everything, and we outsource a lot of creativity or insight. I think I called it boredom, right? You need boredom to get insights,
You
creative
do.
insights, and people. Well, first, everyone hates boredom. It's uncomfortable. It's not nice. But also, people just outsource creative insights and creative to someone else. If I'm most worried about the folks who, unless they're very highly specialized, and these I think are the only ones that might fall into the category you just mentioned about being specialized. For the outsourced labor, I see AIs and machines doing like more and more of that,
Yeah.
not just every year, but every day.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll give
So
you
if you're
an
somebody that's a
example about this.
generalist,
We
yeah.
mentioned McDonald's earlier. Sorry to interrupt, but this came into my head, and it's
Mhm.
so classic. This time last year, I had never used the McDonald's app, and I had only ever used once the kiosk touchscreen thing that they have in there. And I mean, that to me, that screen is using it is even slower than just talking to whoever's at the cash register,
Yeah. That always
right?
drives me
But
crazy. I totally hear
the
you.
app has completely changed how I interface with McDonald's. And now, as I'm driving in, or even before I get there, I take care of the order, right, on the app. And
Yep.
then when I get there, I have a choice. I can wait in a parking lot spot with a number. I can go through the drive-thru. I can walk into the store, but it's done. And so, I mean, how many McDonald's people, how many teenagers, and we think about fast food and teenagers, but that's not actually true, right? There's lots of
Right.
people of all ages work at fast food places and fast casual places. How many, if there are 1,000 people like me in my metro area, how many McDonald's people are not going to have jobs anymore? 5?
Yeah.
Maybe?
Maybe I don't think it's going to decrease them that dramatically, because in that aspect, it increases the efficiency of people working at McDonald's in the way that
Right.
I see it. So, like, for instance, I just see it like as an efficiency increaser. It probably isn't going to have somebody lose their job over that. I think it's just going to make them more efficient and more effective. So, like, for instance, I do the same thing here. If I go to Dunkin' Donuts, or what's the other one I'm thinking of here locally? Any of the restaurants, it's just simple. I'm giving them my order. They can actually be more effective in the kitchen, or wherever they need to be more effective, I think, in the restaurant.
John, you just literally said 4 minutes ago, because of some kind of AI that you're using now, you can use that and be 10x or 40x and don't have to hire somebody. So it can't be both, right? It can't be, boy, I get to use software to avoid
Yeah,
hiring people, and then the software is not gonna like put people out of work.
I think it
It
depends on the
has to do
industry.
it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to eventually,
Yeah.
but, at the
But that's
same
what we're talking about, right? How do you outrun it? Because what
yeah,
choice do you have except to outrun? I mean, to me, unless you're in sort of I hate using this word, but unless
mm,
you're in a non-fungible job, right? And fungible, in case anyone forgets, because it's one of those words like heuristic that you either use it a lot or you never use it. I apologize. Fungible Fungible means it's easy to swap something out. Like, money is the most fungible like thing there ever
mm,
is. Right? And then non-fungible means that you're doing something in the job terms. You're doing something that a machine might never ever be able to do. So
yeah,
a lot of like healthcare, nurses' aides, caring for elderly, hospice, a lot of that kind of stuff is just always going to require people to take care of people.
same with the
Plumbers,
trades.
you can't outsource,
Trades,
right? You can't
yeah,
even outsource a plumber, let alone like replace them with a machine. Like who knows?
yeah,
Every job's different. That kind of work where someone has to do something physical and is relatively specialized, that will go last as far as the AI
yes,
revolution goes.
that will definitely go
And
last.
and then and then the other two sort of categories based on those outsourcing models that we had earlier was there's basically geeks and artists, right? There are people who work with tech and math, and there are people who work with stories in some
Right,
way or another,
right.
right? Those are the people that AI has the hardest time replacing. But it's still not bad, even
Yes,
now, at replacing the lower tiered, lower skilled versions of those jobs.
right. It's funny when I said now I'm kind of thinking about what I just said. So in what I just said, I'm also realizing that we've had a shortage of people going back to a lot of these food service places.
Yeah.
So in that regard, they need to be more efficient, but they're not using the AI and the different things that they've and the different tools that they have, which is kind of funny because it's the one thing that really would be a big benefit to them. So, like for instance, I'd mentioned I think Dunkin' Donuts as an example, and Starbucks is another one here locally that I know. They have an app and different things to take orders, and they aren't using it. So it's like they're almost some of them here have actually ignored the orders that they're getting from the app, and they're
Hmm.
asking to place them at the window and all this other stuff. So they're not even using the tools that they have to make them
Hmm.
more efficient.
I
But
have
there's
not come
already
across
here a
that.
shortage of those jobs. Yeah. So
But
it's
right.
yeah, shame on them.
Shame on them. So like, I
Yeah.
mean, what do? You either to outrun AI, and I will
Yeah.
eventually let Dr. V talk. You can either move into a job that's non-fungible, right? We talked about the
Yeah.
plumbing, the electrician, right?
Carpenter,
Certain
yeah,
kinds of
all those
like
things.
project management is probably a job that's not very easy to like swap out, or you can
Yeah.
outsource it to some degree, but you can't have a machine,
No.
right? And someone who like takes care of you and helps you use the bathroom when you're 98 years old, like all of these kind of jobs, those are going to be done by people for probably as long as I'm alive. And besides that, if I mean, it sounds terrible to say, but really the advice is move, right? Move your career to one that is non-fungible if you're going to stay in that type of outsource model, which is outsourcing work or services.
Right. I mean,
And then,
we had mentioned yesterday, the app that pulls different things from your broadcasts.
yeah,
And I know there's a new video editing app that came out that does some of the video editing app by AI, which is I haven't tried that yet, but I'm sure that'll be fascinating.
yeah,
Um, there's just so many different things but they're all right now very lower level. So anybody that moves to kind of the upper echelon, learns how to embrace AI and use it, is going to
that's
be
yeah.
ahead of the curve. That's
Like
really
those
what,
those are basically the three things, right? When I talked about
yeah.
the non-fungible service kind of work, there's the work where you're the person who works with the AI, right? And mostly like in the tech or hybrid kind of thing, and then someone who and the original title for this show before we decided on can you outrun AI to save your job is can you outrun AI by changing the rules?
Mm,
And that's the other option, right? You just change the rules. You
right.
change the rules so that you can change them on a legal level where, I mean, robots don't pay taxes. And
You should
so
make
we
robots
have to
pay
find
taxes?
some kind of model for that. For anyone who relies on payroll taxes, well, if you have fewer employees, you pay less in payroll taxes, right?
Yes.
Or you change the rules by helping invent or do things in a new way that the AI can't catch up to yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah.
All right. And now I'm
Eventually
going to
will.
ask Dr. V if he has anything to say.
This, if my dad were still alive, he would love this conversation
Yeah.
because years ago he told me, he says, Christopher, he says, there are three major rackets that you need to go into. He says, first of all, he says, gosh, now I forget it. There's the health racket,
Hmm.
Yeah.
the
Yeah, go
God
ahead.
racket, and organized crime. He said, well, organized crime, right off the bat, that's not something that you want to get into because you might get caught. He said,
The
and the God
retirement
racket,
plan, the retirement
yeah,
plan in organized crime is not great.
Not
yeah, no,
great.
no, no, no. I mean, it's like wearing cement galoshes.
Yeah.
No.
But then he said, he said that, the God racket, because he was the son of a minister,
Right.
BK. And he says, pardon my French, but he says, that's a shitty job. Hard to outsource the ministry.
Yes.
But then he said, then there's a health racket. He says, the health racket, you can make a lot of money. People are always sick, and some of them are chronically sick, and they never die.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so I see your point about caregivers and others, because that is people are going to want the human touch unless you can come
Yeah.
up with a robot that has the tactile sensations and stuff. Like, for example, John's wife is a physical therapist and a massage therapist. I don't know that anybody's going to be suddenly exchanging her services for an AI massage chair, for
Right.
example.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But I do think, so think about also in terms of things like creativity. I don't know that AI generated music is going to be that interesting, or,
No.
writers, scripts and things
I've
like, unless
tried
they
to
use these
use
formulas,
I mean, we have services for that now, right? You have like Brain FM and you have Endel and these they make this sort of like
Yeah.
never ending, never repeating kind of ambient music for if you want to
Yeah.
think of something. And I've tried all of them
Yeah.
and I hate all of them.
Oh, I
They
like
have
Brain
my
FM
money,
myself.
but they don't have my heart. Right? I would rather just listen to there's some set of channels now on YouTube where they just make these insanely long videos. Nothing happens in the video. It's really the music. But it's like 24 hours of, let's say, soft jazz.
Well, sometimes it's also on a loop. That's
Yeah.
the other thing.
Well, it
And you
is
don't notice
basically
it
the
because
same
you're not,
song
loop.
played
Yeah.
over and over.
yeah, you're
Probably
not
not.
listening 24
Yeah.
hours to
But
that particular.
to me, that's more useful for
Yeah.
sort of shutting out the world and thinking through a topic. Whereas the computer generated stuff, I mean, it's fine as music, I guess, but it's for some reason it's just discordant with how I think.
It's
I can't.
patterns is an artificial, and I think to a certain extent
Yeah.
there's a lack of creativity.
Yeah.
Because there's certain associations and
Yeah.
certain special flavor that a human being can give to music, just
Yes.
as an artist to a painting or a sculpture. Now, the other thing is, you think about this. I mean, how would you use? I'm thinking the judicial system. How would you use AI in there, other than to research cases and to look at the database when you're presenting in trial? But I don't know anybody wants a robot defending them in court.
No,
in a
but
lawsuit.
almost certainly every large law firm, what they do is they're one of the first industries to sort of embrace it. It's because they use it to scan through and catalog and read documents from discovery because they might
Yeah.
get buried with thousands or
Yeah.
millions of documents. So they use AI to go starting off with just software and then machine learning and then ultimately to
Well,
smarter.
there are these huge federal cases right now and state cases. I can think of in New
Yeah.
York where they're going through millions of pages
Yeah.
of documents.
They use
Yeah.
software. They
Yeah.
don't.
Okay.
Otherwise, it
Yes.
would require an army of lawyers, like more lawyers than exist in the United States.
Yeah, an army of lawyers. My original intent was I was pre-law when I went to college. So I escaped.
Good for you. Yeah.
But it's so the AI thing is very interesting. You spoke earlier of some of the writing apps like Jasper and all those other things.
Copy AI and a bunch of
Yeah,
them.
they need a lot of massaging still, and
Still.
and what's the funny thing is when I take a piece of just like a email subject headline that I've created, and I throw it into the AI like a Jasper or used to be Jarvis, and it comes back worse than
Yeah.
what I had created. I thought I keep thinking to myself, or I take a piece of the AI generated content and put it into the AI,
Yeah.
and it comes out even worse again. There's sometimes there
None of
seems to be a
them
degradation in quality.
None of them promise that the output will be good. They'll
No
only
kidding.
promise that it will be original, and by original, they mean it isn't plagiarized. It's been
Right.
changed
It's
enough
not
so that
plagiarized. Yeah.
nobody it will
Yeah.
make it through a plagiarism like
It's
AI, right?
yeah. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I
But
don't know if I'd
that's it.
want to
The
have
stuff is
write
so
a love
generic.
poem.
It all reads the same as everyone else's,
Probably
Yeah.
not that.
and right? And you need to change the rules. If anything's ever gonna teach you that you need to continually evolve and change the rules to stay ahead and stay employed, it will be using any kind of AI writing tool.
Yeah.
Because the writing is
Yeah.
so bland and generic that honest to God, you literally could not
Generic.
tell that it didn't come from any of the other AI engines, let alone some,
And
some
this
other
goes
source.
this goes to that whole thing back to creativity, whether it's art or music or literature or anything. People want to be entertained, and I don't know if people are going to be entertained by AI entertainment apps. I mean, some
Yeah.
maybe, but
Yeah.
that's games, for example. But
Yeah.
somebody has to create the game, create the rules of the game, and then make it incredibly engaging, so you just can't wait to get back and play.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't see actors going anywhere,
No.
right?
No.
I think singers would be replaced sooner than actors, but I don't think
Oh,
singers are gonna be
oh.
replaced anytime
I-
either.
I don't see singers.
In fact, somebody did a movie that was scripted by AI, which is
Oh, yeah.
pretty humorous. If you ever get a chance, look that up. It's hysterical.
And I'm
But
sure it's challenging also, by the way, because when you're creating a writing AI or a music AI, not so much music, I guess, but anything else, right? You have to put guardrails around it right from the beginning so it doesn't learn and start mimicking the very worst parts of humanity,
mm,
right? We all saw the headlines from the earlier versions of Cortana, which is Microsoft's like branded
yeah,
AI and stuff, where it so depressingly fast. It starts doing hate speech and bigotry and all this kind of stuff, right? And it learned it from us,
Exactly.
and what
Because
we wrote.
we're wired to focus on the negative. It's our little monkey minds or lizard brains.
Yes,
They give you more of what you are.
yeah.
Mm.
But now some
so
things I found it very useful for. Like I had to do a quick video script one day. What would normally take me a couple hours took me, I don't know, 20 minutes.
right.
Had a nice video script all ready to go.
Was it a lovely end product?
It worked out
And the
okay.
job,
I mean, could I have done it better myself? Yeah.
right?
Was it worth the extra time to do it better? Yeah, it would be marginally better if I had done that, but wouldn't be a whole lot different.
So you
So I
could
think
pull
it
into
worked
your
good for that.
local. You could pull into your local McVideo and go to the kiosk and punch in the things you want, and out comes your commercial or your
Yeah, there you go.
video sales letter.
Well, and we know they've got the AI to do the voiceovers for video. It's just whether or not they could put the
Oh,
imagery together.
but some of the
That would be a
dulcet
problem.
tones,
Yeah.
some of the
Yeah,
dulcet
yeah,
tones just
not
can't
gonna
be.
work.
No,
No,
not at all.
no.
And then I would suggest, I'd suggest one more like aspect to this, and
Okay.
it's
Okay.
I think that people who are freelancers, people who are like have their own like small businesses and so on, they're experiencing this change earlier than most corporate employees will. Because what'll
Yeah,
happen in a corporate job is that the AI will start taking over more and more of your job. And it kind of seems like, oh man, my job used to suck on a 8 on a scale of 8 to 10. And now it only sucks on 7 on a scale
right.
of
Well,
1,
it is.
1 to 10. But then to them, it's very binary. It's like, okay, it's like AI is not really a thing. And I'm sure I'm important and my manager, cherishes me and so on. And then, AI gets to the point where they don't need you anymore. And so you went from having a job to not having a job. Whereas for us, it's like AI is at the margins, but we see it nibbling more and more and more in.
Yes.
I just like the idea of a corporate manager cherishing you.
Yeah, right.
You have to
My
be
manager
deluded.
understands
You
me.
got to be deluded.
Shocking
I'm
thought.
valuable here. I've told myself a story that they would never let me go
Exactly.
because I'm so great. And next thing you know, it's like, well, It's
Well,
not that we don't need you specifically, but we don't need 4 people to do this because we have
Mm.
software and and smart agents that can now do 25% of your job. So we're going to have 3 people plus an AI.
so
That's only
speaking of
happened to me twice in my life.
Yeah.
speaking of people not being needed anymore, I'm trying to remember what was the stat on how many people will be their jobs will be lost from AI. I try to remember that was something like, was it 50% or 30% of
It's
all
a
jobs?
very large
And the
percentage.
Yeah,
question is,
very
what do
percent.
you do with those people then? Then it becomes a major social problem
Huge
because
issue.
you have to find A, things for people to do, and B, you've got to feed them and shelter them. Or are you going to reduce the size of your population? There's some crazy stuff in terms of the long
Yeah,
term implications of extreme productivity.
huge long-term implications.
So
I don't have an
you
answer
could
to
even go
that.
to you could go to the 30-hour work week, the 20-hour work week, but for some folks, they're going to be lucky if they can find the 10-hour work week.
Yeah.
Right. I think I think the one thing that surprised me the most, just even in the past year, I can't say this year, but even in the past 3 months, we I think we started, at the very beginning of 2021, we were starting to see more of the writing AIs and all of that, and then now you're looking at, like, we may have had a couple of tools back in 2021. Now we've got 40, 50 tools that we use on a regular basis for
Yeah.
anything from social media to ads to writing. There's just a number of things.
A veritable
All right, I tell you what,
cornucopia.
we have to wrap up. So I'm
Quick
going to,
progress.
because he came in last, we'll let Dr. V sum up his position first. And then, John, you're, you're at this point the most frequent recurring guest, so you get to go second last, and then I'll close this out.
Beautiful.
And Dean being the most frequent
I am the
host and
most
guest
frequent person on this theme. Yeah.
on this thing. Well, I was just to look at something. I think your topic, and I do apologize for being tardy to the party, but your topic is interesting because there's an implied fear that you have to outrun something.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the question
Well,
is,
just like there's an implied jadedness by calling healthcare, religion, and crime rackets.
hey, my dad just had the best sense of humor.
Yeah.
His cynicism was with a wink and a nod. to
Right.
the
Yeah.
point where he says the great thing about healthcare is you can always blame the patient because you can't control what they're doing 24/7. They may be in your office for 15 minutes or a half
There you
hour or
go.
something like
Yeah.
that, but they do all kinds of crazy stuff when they're outside of the
Yeah.
office. So in terms of crazy stuff, I think things are going to get a little crazy as we see AI work its way into more and more professions and more applications. And my greatest concern is what I mentioned towards the end here, which is what are the social implications of having so many jobs replaced by AI in the never ending quest for extreme productivity?
Right. What about you, John?
Like I said at the end here, I'm just surprised at how quickly new tools are coming up, in
Yeah.
AI. And with that speed of development, it's not gonna take long before a lot of stuff is getting replaced very, very quickly. So the implications of what we see are real, and they're happening quickly. Even though you may not see it right now in what you're doing, we're seeing a lot of it.
Change happens slowly and then quickly.
Yeah, and then
Always
quickly.
been like that, right? All right.
Yeah,
I would say that, and I stick with the connotation of outrun because it is
yeah,
it's a race, right?
it is a race.
Gaining. To me, the only way you outrun it is to either do something that's non-fungible, right? Something a machine simply can never do. Usually something physical where you're doing a job where a machine couldn't do it, or you're dealing with people in a way, right? You
Mhm,
can work with AIs and make that your thing in sort of a hybrid work team, or just to generalize, you can make people feel something. And those are the only 3 categories.
mm.
All
Work
right.
with
This one was
people and make
fun.
them feel something. That was good.
I always have a good line.
Rock on.
It's kind of my, reason for being here.
And we're still
All
live.
right. And that's enough of this racket for today.
This racket, the live streaming racket.
Yeah. Your dad didn't tell you about the live streaming racket, but he would have
But
if he
there
known
was
about
no
it.
live streaming
Yeah,
at the time.
exactly. All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.